San Francisco papers are investing a lot of money to try and get a service just like that started. Science editor Steve Newman reports on one person already using the brand new system.
This video may contain adult language and situations. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. What is up, my dudes? It's the Reddit Fairy. I'm back with another video, and today I've got some r/ProRevenge. So sit back, relax. It's about to get a tad bit vengeful up in this bitch. Let's get into it. Hey politician/boss, no IT system for you. Have a good start of year. Really long, but it's worth it. First, the background. I used to work as an IT assistant for the government, not United States, but I'm not saying more, in education. I worked in the coordination of a subsystem for high school level education, focused in creating and administrating new schools in small rural towns. So each school cannot have more than 100 students. Otherwise, the school was passed to another subsystem. This administration system was new for my state and was only 5 years old, yet it was still not fully recognized. Think of it being in beta mode. Also, because of that, most of its work and methods were improvised and adapted to fit the way things were. My state is big, and a lot of it has mountains. This means that the furthest school was 20 hours away from the state's capital, and the fastest way, which took 5 hours, was taking a light aircraft, which is expensive considering the low salaries of the teachers. That also means that a lot of the communities didn't have access to internet. Some didn't even have light. So my immediate boss, the supervisor of the IT department, who is a cool and easygoing lady with a degree in software development, made an entire software system from zero to make the job easy for everyone. This way, teachers on remote communities only had to travel to the nearest town with internet and go only to the coordination. Everything ran smooth. However, the state was too cheap to pay for the hosting and the domain name, so she paid for all of it. Also, since it was not really recognized as a full subsystem, our contract said we were just teachers, so software development was not listed as part of the job. These two details are important later. Since it is a government system, elections changed everything. The old boss got replaced by a politician who didn't know how things worked. He immediately started to question how things worked. The flexibility and decentralization were the things that he didn't like the most, since it escaped his control. He started to change things his way, but the senior staff are not pushovers and tell him how some of his ideas are bad in a very gentle and well-explained way. He doesn't care and acts like an asshole. Then, as a good old politician, he begins to hire recommended workers, family and friends of other politicians, which are more malleable. Once they are established, the boss then fires my supervisor and replaces her with a recommended worker. He also fires the supervisor of human resources, who was the husband of my supervisor, and does this at the end of the year. Now, being education related, the start of the year is really busy, so everyone but the recommended advise against it. But boss is a politician. He has experience in administration, and he trusts that his new blood will be able to pull it off. Until the bad news arrived. My supervisor blocked the software, so no one could use it unless she is paid for it. The boss is outraged and starts to work in a sue. He starts being an asshole with the old guard for being complicit, so they quit. Around 45% of all the staff, including the lawyer, the only worker in the legal department. He then takes it on me and asks me to rebuild the system and gives me a week to do so. My specialty is design and front end, so I tell him I can't. A long angry sermon later, I quit. He sues her, But the demand is really badly redacted and does not proceed because of all the software was in her name. She only gives back a raw SQL database, and that's it. So the year starts, and the teachers are furious that the system is not working, and that they have to handle everything through the institutional mail, which is awful to use in slow internet connections, and had to do several trips to the coordination. The parents are not happy at all either. And we are talking about country folk and indigenous people, not precisely the kind of people you like to mess with. Chaos followed. The state's Secretary of Education wasn't happy at all. TLDR, new boss is an asshole, fires 2 very important employees, including the developer of the internal system. She blocked the system, and the demand of the boss fails. 45% of the most experienced employees quit too. Chaos. Edit. I think I need to clarify the domino effect that caused this, and that my supervisor knew it would happen. Politicians here are a privileged class. They really need to fuck things up to be fired. We are talking huge corruption scandal or shooting someone on live TV. He was a lesser politician. The Secretary of Education, the one who got him the job, is not. So it was basically a favor. This is a statewide subsystem. That mess was political murder. He is not getting any important position because no big politician will risk to trust him, nor to look bad in front of the public. For a politician to lose the ability to go up in the hierarchy is a tragedy. Oh, shit. Oh, boy. This reminds me of a certain someone else. Businessman turned politician that has no business. Changing business. That's what I'm just gonna leave it at that. Steal a phone from our store? We'll take your car instead. So this wasn't me, but it happened at one of the retail cell phone stores I manage a few hours ago. We put out demo phones for customers to play with. The funny thing about these phones is that they are locked, cannot be used, and have no real value. From time to time, a dumb thief will come to the stores and take one of these phones. Today was one of those times. This particular store is usually slow, so having 1 or 2 employees working at a time is normal. Today, one was at lunch, so 1 employee was in the store. In walks 2 guys. One is engaging with the employee, asking questions, acting like an interested buyer. The second is looking at the demo phones, but in reality is taking it off the security stand. The employee notices the guy has removed the demo phone from the security device and turns to look at him. The thief makes a run towards the door and, unbelievably, the employee tackles the thief. The 2 roll around, exchanging blows outside the store. It was a completely crazy scene. The good part about all this is that the thief got away with the phone, but in the process of wrestling with the employee, dropped his car keys out of his pocket. The employee picked up the car keys and went inside the store, locked the door, and called the police. To keep a longer story short, the cops came and towed the thief's 2016 Honda Accord. So he got a play phone that is as good as worthless, and lost a car also. And the cops were easily able to identify the thief and put a warrant out for his arrest. TLDR, guy stole a phone, but lost his car and has a warrant out for his arrest. Edit, thanks for the silver. How stupid can people be? Like, seriously. Oh my god. Your moment of stupidity just cost you your car and potentially your life. I mean, not saying you would spend life in prison for this, but that it will impact you for life. You have run out of Amulfax Shuffle Time. This isn't my story, it's my father's, but I'm posting this on his behalf. Decades ago, my father was studying computer engineering in America, and he was damn good at it too. He got his PhD, and from looking at the pattern recognition work he did to get it, I can say that he is part of the foundation that allows for tech like facial recognition and similar. Anyway, at the time, he was working his master's degree, and for some reason, his university hired/called in a PhD from China to lecture and assist in some work. This guy was a 10 out of 10 asshole. Nobody liked him, and the only thing he ever did was rub his PhD in your face, because if you only had a bachelor's, then you were below him. This guy would disrupt things, cut you off constantly, dismiss your opinions, etc. At some point, my father and his friends got sick of his shit, so they developed a simple yet infuriating plan to put this guy in his place. One day, the guy goes to log into the uni system, only to be met with a message saying, "Error, you have run out of Amulfax Shuffle Time. Please contact your local administrator." Of course, my father and his friends were the go-to people for this issue. So, this man had to humble up and go ask my father what this error was, as he had no clue what Amulfax Shuffle Time was. Nobody did, because it didn't exist. Anyway, my father smiles at the guy as he says, "Ah yes, our systems run on Amulfax Shuffle Time. If you want more, you'll have to fill out Form 27B/6. For those of you who don't recognize that reference, Form 27B/6 is from the movie Brazil, where a man was told to threaten people with this seemingly non-existent joke form. People who weren't aware of the trick would back off when asked about whether they had first filled out this form. Anyway, the guy had to read through and fill in a couple of pages of this falsified form, after which he was awarded a couple more hours of Amulfax Shuffle Time. This continued on for months before the guy finally got sick of having to fill out the form over and over again, dropping what he was doing so he could get more time on the university's computers. So, he decided to refer to the manual on Amulfax Shuffle Time. My dad tells me that you could access manuals to things like this by typing something in the command prompt, or something like that. Anyway, little did he know, my dad had gone ahead and written a full manual on Amulfaxivity with like 100 pages that he just didn't have patience to look through and study in detail. So this guy had to keep dealing with it day in and day out for a long time, having to do this annoyingly, painstakingly task for every few hours he spent on the computer. Eventually, my dad decided that the guy probably suffered enough, and that the experience did seem to humble him enough to accept my dad's offer to grab a drink when they were free. They chatted like mates for a bit, before my dad brought up Amulfax Shuffle Time, and they laughed about it, and then offered to give him some permanent shuffle time. Throughout all of it, the guy never suspected a thing, and unless he browses Reddit, he probably never will. TLDR, a PhD was an asshole to my dad and his friends in university, so my dad secretly forced him to waste time filling in a form every few hours or he'd be locked out of the university's computer systems. Edit. Sorry, to all the Singaporeans, I'm sorry, I got it mixed up. The guy was Chinese. I must have misheard my dad or got distracted. Was writing all this from memory. Haha. Anyway, wow, this post blew up. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. That really was a good story. I guess, yeah, you know, it pays to be humble, and that's... If you're full of yourself, I don't like you. Attack me? Get ready for doom. I've had migraines since I was 3 or 4. Sometimes they start slow, and sometimes they hit like a hammer. I can be instantly unable to function if they hit quickly. In college, this could be a huge problem. The only available medications just knocked you out, so you didn't care that you hurt and wanted to vomit. My freshman year, 1987, I was at a party for my roommate's boyfriend's birthday. I had never had champagne before and didn't know that it was a migraine trigger. I took a sip or two of champagne and instantly got a migraine. We were at someone's house about 20 minutes away from the dorm. My roommate didn't want to leave the party, so she arranged for a guy she knew to drive me home. She had no idea what he was actually really like. She just knew him from a few parties. On the drive that I thought was to my dorm, this guy pulled over on the side of the road in an undeveloped area. No one was around. He sexually assaulted me and left me on the side of the road. I didn't even know where I was, much less how to get back to the dorm or to a hospital. After a while, some lady found me curled up on the side of the road. She thought that I was dead. Cell phones were not a thing, so she half lifted me into her car, wrote down where she found me, and drove me to the nearest hospital. I could barely speak enough to tell the hospital people my name. I was beaten black and blue by this guy. The hospital knocked me out for about 8 hours with pain meds and muscle relaxers once they were sure I didn't have a head injury. He only hit me in places that it would not show. My roommate didn't get home until about a day after I did. She was staying at her boyfriend's dorm room. She probably wouldn't have come home as early as she did, but her parents called at the same time every weekend, and she had to be home for that. She was shocked when she saw how beat up I looked. I asked her how she knew that guy, and I learned that she didn't really. He was just at a party now and then. I wasn't happy with the situation, or that she let some creep she barely knew drive me somewhere. She felt really guilty, but guys don't advertise that they like to rape girls. She did have some information on the guy. He didn't live in our city, but instead went to a really Christian school with a great law school. He was in law school and was visiting for the party. His dad was a really well-known lawyer for a televangelist church. That was the beginning of what I learned about him. Remember, the internet was in its infancy, and social media did not exist. I called for some other people who knew him from the party and got some information from them. I learned his girlfriend's name. Then I went to the library and learned about this girlfriend, the church, the law school, the college he was at, etc. I had photos from the hospital. I had declined to press charges because even though I knew that it would be hard to prove, even with all the bruises, it would be my word against his. He was from a good family and went to a Christian college and law school. My family was not prominent, and I was wearing a mini skirt that night. At the time, it was normal for lawyers to smear rape victims based on what they wore, if they had a drink, especially if they were under 21, etc. I didn't want to have to deal with all of that. I just wanted to ruin his life without having it ruin mine. I got phone numbers for the dean of his law school, the head of the college overall, for his father, for his girlfriend, and for the person who owned his apartment complex. He lived in some fancy apartment owned by a guy who was a big donor to the college. It was for people getting master's or law degrees or medical degrees after they had already had bachelor degrees. The apartments were given out as a type of scholarships to the school, and they were supposed to be really nice. I never went there, so I don't know firsthand what they are like, but I heard about them from this guy's friends. I wrote some letters, including tear stains that made some of the writing blur a bit. I included copies of the photos of my bruises. I said that I didn't want to press charges because I knew it would be an embarrassment to the college/law school/televangelist/his parents, whichever one fit the person I was writing to. I just thought they ought to know because he could harm a member of their family or congregation or school. He could also be a huge publicity nightmare if he did this to someone else, and I didn't want that because I believed in their message, sent to the church and the school. I called the girlfriend, her number was in the phone book, and told her that her boyfriend raped and beat me. She cried and said he had beaten her too, but she thought it was her fault. I told her the rape was not my fault. I was trying not to puke when he attacked me. I told her to stop seeing him and have nothing to do with him if he treated her that way. She said that her family would be upset, as he was from such a good family. And he was so well thought of at the law school. I didn't tell her that I was working on ruining that for him. I sat back and waited for things to happen after I mailed the letters. His family was shocked, but not surprised. They wrote me an apology, saying he had been in trouble before, but they thought he had gotten better after the church intervened in his life. Apparently, he hadn't, and they were cutting ties to him. The man who owned the apartments actually called me. He wanted to hear what happened from me so he could figure out if I was telling the truth. So I told him what happened and why I didn't press charges. He believed me and started eviction proceedings. A representative from the church called to ask me to stop telling lies about the guy. I told them that they shouldn't protect a rapist. To ask girls he dated how he behaved because his girlfriend told me that he beat her when he got angry. They were shocked. I never heard from the college, but the dean of the law school called me. He asked if I told the truth, and I assured him that I had. DNA wasn't commonly used. It was first used in a criminal case that year. So it was my word versus his word. Just the accusation was enough to have the guy kicked out of law school, especially with the photos of my bruises and the tear stains on my letters, which was the reason I wrote them out by hand and let myself cry while I wrote them. Apparently, those accepted to that law school should be above a reproach. I don't know if they would have handled it the same way if I tried to prosecute the guy, but since I was trying to keep it quiet so I didn't harm the school's reputation, it meant that I was a good Christian girl who could be believed. I was actually surprised that the letters had so much success. I expected his father to send a letter telling me to stop slandering/libeling his son. The letter saying they were cutting all ties to him was a surprise, but a good one. Sadly, it indicated that I was probably not the first one to accuse him. After about a year later, I found out he was working for a company installing carpet in homes. I called that company and told them that they were sending a rapist into people's homes. I even offered to send photos of the bruises if they wanted them. The woman that I spoke to was horrified. Just the idea that he had been accused of rape and that I cared enough to call when I learned he was going into people's homes was enough for her. I learned that not only did the company fire him, they called other companies and told them what a liability he would be if they hired him. He had started to drink heavily by that point, at least according to the friends who knew him at my school. I went on with my life, got therapy to help me cope, eventually got married and had almost 30 years with an amazing husband. I don't know what happened to this guy, but I know he never became a lawyer, his dream. I know that I made his life a lot harder. I did Google him a few years ago. He has had many arrests and has spent quite a few years behind bars. I like to think that by getting him kicked out of law school and getting his family to understand that he was very much unreformed, I helped speed him into the defendant's chair in a courtroom. Good for you, OP. That guy sounded like a total dickwad. He deserves worse than that. It seems like he really only got a slap on the wrist, but if this happened now, maybe there'd be more of a chance of convicting him because of DNA and all that stuff, but holy shit, I'm glad you're okay now. Well, you're coping anyway. I'm glad you're doing okay. My contractor was cheap, so I made sure to get my money's worth. So this actually happened between my father and the contractor who built his house, my childhood home. In 2000, my parents and their 2 young children, ages 7 and 5, that's me, were looking to move into a house big enough for a family of 4 and that they could stay in for a very long time. They found a newly constructed street in a quiet neighborhood in a town known for being family-friendly. It was perfect. There were only 4 available lots, so my mother chose the one she liked best. Now, the houses on these lots were still under construction, so they were mostly just framing at this point. So my parents decided to contact the contractor, let's call him Alfred, and see if they could have any input into the design, as they had already set up a mortgage agreement on the property. Alfred agreed, but didn't let them do too much, which wasn't all that bad. My parents were pretty busy trying to sell their old house anyway. A few months go by, and the house is finally ready to be moved into. My parents are thrilled. They finally have their family home. We move in and everything's great for about 36 hours. On literal day 2, the furnace in the basement breaks and spews smoke throughout the whole house, setting off the smoke detectors. The police and fire department show up, investigate, and tell us that we can return in 72 hours. So we stay in a nearby hotel for 3 days. Everything is great again until we start noticing a bunch of small details that Alfred seemed to have overlooked. My dad hires a home inspector to look at the house. The inspector finds numerous faults that could cost thousands to fix. My dad is pissed. So my dad, being the calm asshole he is, and I love him for it, decides to get some help in paying for these repairs to his 7-month-old house. You see, Alfred has been the contractor for 4 houses on the street, of which only one, ours, had been bought. So my dad went to the bank and expressed interest in the other lots. He asked that a $1,000 lien be placed on each one, and this was all legal. Alfred found out and was rightfully angry. He couldn't sell these lots because of the liens. He asked my dad to remove them. My dad agreed and said he would, if Alfred paid for the repairs. Alfred refused to pay, so my dad refused to lift the liens. Alfred then sues my parents. My parents countersue. The court rules in favor of my parents. My dad had to lift his liens, but Alfred, he had to pay my parents $50,000 instead of paying $2,000 to $3,000 for repairs. And a home inspector looked at the other 3 lots and made him pay for any repairs on them. TLDR, my dad's contractor is a cheap asshole, so my dad legally makes him pay more than what he is owed. Good for you. See, so many people think taking shortcuts will save them a buck, but it doesn't ever pay to take shortcuts. Measure twice, cut once. Rich boy becomes a car salesman at my dealership. We find the spare key of his Lexus and proceed to make his life a living hell. This happened a while back in 2008 when I was starting out in the business. I was broke, a failed engineer from a local bankrupt telecom company. I had given up on my engineer dreams and took the only job I could find in a Toyota dealership, racked with angry Bourbonites whining about their accelerator recall pedal. One jolly morning, owner decides to bring in his son as a salesman to teach him the trade. He's an arrogant sissy who for a 30-year-old man uses the phrase, "I'll tell my father," way too much for comfort. The same day we catch on that he has a scheme, which is to create fake cash downs on deals, taking the amount off profit, and pocket the customer's checks. We bring it up with management, who hate the asshole and give him a stern warning. A week later, he buys a Lexus trade-in, which he has under-evaluated. We decide with my manager to make his life a living hell by keeping the spare. The next day, Junior, who of course parks his car where the customers are supposed to park, is startled as his alarm starts going off the moment he leaves the car. We've taped the spare with a rock, Rock is pressing firmly on alarm button, which goes off when his key is out of the car. Honk, honk, honk. He goes nuts after a week asks us to take the car back under threat of "my daddy." Honk, honk, honk. Sales manager tells him to eat a crane's dick. We take key out, and every time he brings someone off Craigslist to see the car. Honk, honk, honk. Junior tries to get the car stolen in a bad neighborhood for fancy, real value insurance money a few days later. Gets caught by a cop. No regrets. Also, honk, honk, honk. Oh, that's hilarious. Karen tries to withhold benefits and doesn't like the consequences. I used to have Veterans Disability Pension, VDP, for a hearing defect. It's now merged with my state pension. It was small and back home and was paid annually. However, I moved to the UK and this pension was still paid for by my government, but now administered by the UK DWP, Department of Work and Pensions, who paid it fortnightly. Some years ago, I was entitled to a disability allowance, DA, because of various issues. At the time, I was diagnosed with diabetes, but was trying to control it with diet. So I got called into the local job center for an interview. Unfortunately, I had a Karen for an interviewer. I'm on the spectrum, but I'm high functioning. This means that I don't suffer fools gladly, and I can be very rules bound. Firstly, she questions why I hadn't declared the VDP as part of my earnings. I had, but it was under another part on the form. Then she said I couldn't have diabetes because I wasn't taking any medication, and as I was telling Porky's, she would not allow my claim. Now, the DA claim had nothing to do with my diabetes. However, she was stupid to put in her letter of rejection that I hadn't diabetes because I wasn't taking any medication for it. She also said they would no longer pay my VDP. I sent a letter to the High Commission who said, don't worry, they would deal with it. I handed a copy of my letter to my doctor, who was incensed. She complained to the DWP, asking about Karen's medical qualifications. So I got asked to have another interview about 1 p.m. on a certain day with the Karen. I said that I couldn't guarantee to attend on that day, as I had another appointment that morning. The message back from Karen was if I didn't attend, my claim would be refused. So going with the flow, I said that I would try to attend, but I might be a little late. So I have my morning appointment, go home and change, and toddle off to the job center. I get there on the dot of 1 p.m., only to find that Karen had booked an interview room on the first floor instead of the ground floor, and there is no lift. To cut a long story short, it took me nearly 15 minutes to haul my sorry ass up those stairs in the end, being helped by this guy in a suit who asked why I was trying to get to the first floor. I told him that I had an interview and that the Karen who was seeing me chose the room. So I get to the room and Karen says, "You are late. I am refusing your claim unless you have a very good reason." So I said to her, "Well, my day has been interesting. You were warned that I had an appointment this morning, and because of it, I might be late." Karen: "I want you to tell me about this appointment and exactly what happened to make you late." Me: "I turned up at the appointment this morning, took my clothes off, and then had two nice young ladies slather my meat and 2 veg with lube. They then proceeded to do things to said meat and to veg. Then they get me to lie down on my side facing the wall, and one then proceeds to stick her fingers up my ass." Karen: "How dare you talk such filth in front of me? Your case is closed." Suit, who was listening out of sight: "Excuse me, Karen, but you did ask him to tell you about his appointment and exactly what happened to make him late." Suit to me. How did your prostate examination go? Me. More tests, unfortunately. Suit. And that was the reason you were late. Me. No. This stupid bitch was being vindictive and interviewed me on this floor instead of the ground floor. She knew my claim was because I had breathing problems and couldn't climb stairs. I think she would have claimed that as I made it to the first floor, I was lying and refused the claim. Suit. I think you are right. Suit to Karen. You will approve this DLA claim as I had to help him up the stairs, and based on my observations, he qualifies. And you and your manager will report to me tomorrow at 9 a.m. in my office to explain your actions. If you are late, you will be terminated. Karen, very white-faced. Yes, sir. Turns out he was an area director that the DWP had sent in to investigate the high level of complaints about that job center. It also turns out that a complaint from a high commissioner about a breaching an international agreement is a big deal for the DWP. Who knew? Oh, she got her ass handed to her. That's karma, like instant karma. That should be an instant karma. Because literally, that is just the worst person that you want to witness your shitty actions. If you're going to steal my laundry detergent, I'm going to ruin your clothes. This is not my story, but that of a friend's mom. I think it's pretty genius. So my friend's mom lives in a building where everyone has their washing machines in a big room in the basement. One day, she noticed that one of her neighbors was using up her laundry detergent and fabric softener. So she waited until there was only a little left in the bottles and added a generous splash of bleach. The next day, the bottles showed up nearly empty, meaning someone had used them. She never discovered who was using them, probably because the person got embarrassed when they saw that their clothes had been ruined and hid them or threw them away. But she never had an issue with someone using her products ever again. Update. I told my friend that you guys really like the story, and she just told me her mom saw a pair of jeans with bleach stains drying on the clothesline once. LOL. That sounds like something I would do. It's like, it's more petty, really, than pro. But, yeah, I like it. It's, noted. Definitely noted. Thank you, OP. Noted. I, as a former store manager, deliberately hired a thief as my replacement. Original post from r/confession. TLDR. Abusive owners tried to get me to unknowingly hire my own replacement. Due to their behavior, I hired a thief to replace me instead. I was recently let go from my job as a store manager. The company I worked for was abusive to both me and my staff. Some examples, there are a lot more, would be the owners and upper management coming to the store and chasing the staff around while snapping their fingers and saying, "You're not working hard enough, go, go, go." The owners and upper management coming to the store and telling me how fat ex-employee is. The owners/upper management spreading rumors about the staff and I. The owners and upper management screaming at us over the phone, loud enough that customers could hear. A month or so before I was let go, I had a pay dispute wherein I explained bluntly but professionally how they need to pay me because it's the right thing to do. They had promised extra pay above my salary for working hours I shouldn't have had to do because of something they did and then purposely did not pay me that money. Eventually, they paid me, but they really didn't like that I stood up for myself and thus started their plan to get rid of me. One of them even stopped talking to me altogether. After this, I was strangely given permission to hire a staff for the store. I needed one, so I happily posted an ad online and started interviewing people. It took a month, but I finally found one I liked and called the references, which came back average, but good enough. A sales representative I knew saw the resume on my desk and told me I should call X business, which was not on the resume. I did, and it turned out this person had been fired for theft of money and product, in the same industry of which I'm hiring for. I decided not to hire the thief. A few days after deciding against the thief, I was forwarded a resume from the owner that had stopped speaking to me. It was instructing me to interview the thief that I had decided against. But how did this owner get the thief's resume in their inbox? The ad was mine and forwarded only to my email, and only I had the password to the account. I followed the link back to an ad that I didn't write and posted from a different account. This ad was for a store manager. A poor attempt at being sneaky. I could have quit right then, but I had a better idea. The owners are notoriously spiteful, but I know they are also lazy and don't do their due diligence. They think they are having me hire my own replacement without me knowing. So, I hired the thief as my employee, while the owners, having already seen the thief's resume, sees them as a good fit for store manager. I vouched for the thief's references, knowing they'd never call them themselves. 3 weeks later, I was let go when I arrived at my store. The owners seemed confused by the big smile on my face when they told me. I was genuinely happy to be finished there. It was the worst employment experience of my life, but it was a job of necessity. I was able to collect unemployment insurance, thankfully. The thief took over managing the store. Thanks to the new store hours, the thief works 5 days a week with no staff, open to close, unsupervised. Oh shit. That's like a bomb just waiting to go off, I think. That is sneaky. I love this sneaky revenge, you guys. Just keep bringing it. I love it. Alright, my dudes, I hope you enjoyed my first episode of r/ProRevenge as much as I did. If you did, as always, please go ahead and hit that like button. If you're new here, click the subscribe button, and don't forget to hit that bell notification to be notified when I have future videos with content just like this, so you never miss one. I also have all the links to the stories I read today in the description, so don't forget to head on over to Reddit and show them some love. And also, as always, if you have a story that you want me to read on my video, head on over to Reddit, once again, r/RedditFairy. Submit your story there, and who knows, it might show up in the next video. See you guys in the next one.
Imagine, if you will, sitting down to your morning coffee, turning on your home computer to read the day's newspaper. Well, it's not as far-fetched as it may seem. In fact, both local San Francisco papers are investing a lot of money to try and get a service just like that started. Science editor Steve Newman reports on one person already using the brand new system.